Now, Cian Tracey of the Irish Independent is with us. Cian, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. How are we?
The dust is beginning to settle on Ireland's Six Nations triumph.
Slightly.
Yeah.
I think we can get another few days out of it.
I think so too. I mean, the country's going a bit mad, but sure, why wouldn't we? Like, there's definitely two sides to the going mad thing. It's like, oh, we've gone too far. I felt a little bit like we've gone too far in the build-up to the England game, where people were like just arriving to celebrate the victory before the match was played. But now that it's happened, go mad.
If you're not going to enjoy winning a Grand Slam, I mean, it's only been done 4 times in the history, never been done in Dublin. So yeah, like, I mean, even if you touch in the 20s, winning the Grand Slam 24 hours later, like, these are special days for Irish rugby. I think everyone knows that the biggest challenge is ahead later this year, but that can come, like you mentioned there, like it's very important. I think the players are conscious of that. I remember speaking to James Ryan in about 2019, and he said that Rob Kearney said to them in the dressing room after they won it in 2018, to particularly himself and Andrew Porter, who'd only just broken onto the scene, it won't always be like this. And sure enough, it hasn't been. So I think there's an element of enjoying it, and from what I hear, the players certainly enjoyed themselves over the weekend and fully deserved. But it's mad to think, like, on Saturday week now you're going to have Leinster and Munster knocking lumps out of each other in the Champions Cup round of 16, and it all goes back to normal before we build back up again in the summer. But what a weekend for Irish rugby. Yeah,
and look, there's loads of other bits and pieces that we can get into. We did ask you to pick your Six Nations 2023 team. Did all of the players who were nominated, I'm just trying to do a quick toss for the player of the tournament, didn't make it? All right.
No. Controversial.
Who's out?
Well, Thomas Ramos isn't at full back for starters. Hugo Keenan, I think, is, for me, nailed on. One of the first names on the team sheet. I'm looking here now to remember who I picked again.
I've got it for you if you need. So you've gone. We'll start with number 9, which has to be Dupont, who is So this. I hadn't realised this, but maybe everybody knew this, but Matt Williams was on yesterday saying that France were delighted because they had a really hard training block through the early stage, and they hadn't periodised the training to peak for the games. They were like, no, we're going to stress them, we're going to put you out on your feet, we're going to see how you deal with it. It's like, oh, okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think that was definitely the word doing the rounds. And then I think the performance in Twickenham, you saw, like, kind of how they were. Yeah, exactly. And like, my sense of how France were kind of ticking along was they won a Grand Slam last year, not playing the best rugby, you'd have to say, definitely not playing typical French rugby. And while that's grand when you're winning, I was kind of going, wow, okay, if this starts to fall apart a little bit come the World Cup, if there's any supporters that are going to get on the back, it's the French. So the Twickenham performance, I think, was a real stark reminder of that they haven't gone away, and they're able to play the power game, they're able to play the running game. So I thought that was a huge result for France, and performance as well.
After one of the November games, we were at the Aviva and then went to the pub and watched the France-Australia game. It was one of the best games of rugby I've ever seen, because Australia were like, we've nothing to lose here, and it was just before their coach ended up getting fired, but they were running in tries from behind their goal line, and France were doing the same thing. And it was just such a high level of stuff that you were watching, and you're like, I still think France are the best team in the world. And
you do?
Yeah.
So Ireland are obviously not likely to win the World Cup.
Well, I think that the whole number 1 ranking thing is, like, it's nonsensical in a team sport, really. The team who wins the World Cup is currently the best team in the world, and we haven't had a World Cup this year. And at the end of the year, we're going to have a World Cup, and the best team in the world is going to win the World Cup.
And
it's now implied that France were not at their best in Dublin, basically. They physically weren't trained to be at their best on that day.
Yeah, like they were probably at maybe 98-97%, but taking nothing away, like, that was an exceptional Irish performance. And France did turn up on the day as well. So I think the rankings, like, are such a nonsense, really. I don't think the Irish squad really read too much into it, and you see the way the draw for the World Cup is working. It's crazy. So I know everyone knows at this stage, but you have, what is it, top 5 teams ranked in the world, except South Africa, South Africa are on the same side, all on the same side of the draw, which is crazy, really. So you're going to have a good chance that a poor England team could get to a World Cup semi-final. Then once you get to that stage, you know, the old cliche that anything can happen. So also that the calendars are lopsided as well. So, like, you know, the Six Nations will go into cold storage now. We'll have the provinces playing out. But come the summer, the Rugby Championship is going to start. And, you know, if South Africa or the All Blacks or even Australia, who I actually think are dark horses as well, like, they gave Ireland a serious game in November too. So if one of those teams lights it up in the Rugby Championship, you know, suddenly Ireland's Grand Slam is a little bit of a distant memory, and they're coming into the World Cup on form. So there's so much road left to run before we get to the World Cup that loads can happen.
And it's a massive challenge to get us to the stage in September, October, where we were at this point, and like it's not, we don't traditionally play our best rugby at that point of the season because we're not attuned to. So,
but they've done it well when you think about last summer, building into November, clean sweep, building into Grand Slam, clean sweep. So hopefully they've turned a corner in that regard.
Yeah. Okay. So sorry, Dupont is 9, and it's not even up for debate, right?
No. Yeah. That's absolutely. Yeah.
Sexton at 10. Was there anybody who was pushing him out?
I don't think so.
Russell at times.
Finn Russell at times, but I mean, then you think of the Ireland game, and okay, he had a couple of moments, but that was the game where you wanted to see, Finn Russell show
dominant display.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you didn't have that dominant display. I don't think Sexton was at his best in every game. He certainly wasn't at his best last weekend, but he's just so important to Ireland. We saw again in Rome when he didn't play. Now there was other sort of factors in that. You had a new halfback pairing, you had a centre pairing who I don't think will ever play for Ireland again together because it just didn't work in terms of Bundyaki and Stuart McCloskey. And when Sexton isn't there, it just doesn't hum as well. So for me, he was. You
say that, but by the time we get to a World Cup semi-final, we'll be like, they're the only 2 bodies left standing, lads. Out you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think the thing about Finn Russell as well is like he was wearing a knee brace against Ireland, and so he'd obviously gone back and played a game for the club in between, and he wasn't the same player.
Yeah.
And like that
his
again,
had been unbelievable as well, hadn't it?
That's
like Finn Russell is great. Like is great to watch, but I mean, like if you're talking about a team at a championship, who you want there, like it's for me, it's Johnny Sexton every day. Like in terms of like entertainment and stuff, Finn Russell might pull a rabbit out of a hat.
Is he the best out half in the world still?
Johnny Sexton, I would say so. Yeah, I wouldn't take another out half in the world
Incredible.
right now than Johnny Sexton. Like who would you say? Like Richie Mwanga, Andre Pollard. For me, Johnny Sexton every day.
Okay, so you've gone for Mac Hansen and Damien Penaud on the wings.
Yeah, I did take a bit of kind of liberty here now in moving Mac Hansen onto the left wing if we're going to be pedantic, which I usually am when I see teams like this, and then I went against my own golden rule. But look, Mac Hansen is the type of guy I think you could play him out half, you could play him full back, but I thought he was exceptional for Ireland. Obviously he got 2 man of the match performances, and just the energy I think he gives. Obviously he's nominated for Player of the Tournament, fully deserved as well. And James Lowe is probably a bit unlucky to miss out, but Damien Penaud, I think, outside of Dupont, is probably my favourite player in the world to watch. He's just real old school. The try he scored against Ireland was
amazing. That was one of my moments of
it was in
the noise that the French, when they were
I think the Irish fans are making the noises as well. Maybe
it was like old rugby, like it was like
exactly.
Jesus.
And he is real throwback to the old days. He's just such a thrill a minute, and I thought I had to have him in my team. I thought have to make a space for him.
You've gone for a 12 and a 13 combination from Scotland and Ireland?
Yeah, so Sione Tuipulotu I thought was one of the big success stories, I have to say, of Scotland's Six Nations campaign. I think a lot of their success was predicated on the fact that, in a similar way that Ireland aren't as reliant on Johnny Sexton, Gregor Townsend has sort of built attack that it all goes through Finn Russell. But when you have a playmaker like Tuipulotu outside of him, I think it made the Scottish attack less predictable, and I thought he was really, really impressive. Gary Ringrose, some people might say that's a bit controversial because obviously he didn't play in 2 of the games. He was injured in Rome. He was injured last weekend, but my God, when he did play, he just reminded us, I think, of why he is, for me, probably the best 13 in the world at the moment. It was really disappointing that he didn't get a chance, to feature in the Grand Slam. I thought it was really telling that, after he had that horrible injury, which was probably the lowest point, I think, of the Six Nations. I was over in Murrayfield. It was really horrible, like that, the few minutes when he was on the ground. But come the Tuesday, he was back into the team meetings, which shows you how highly he is valued. On the Friday, he was doing the captain's run. On the Thursday night, he presented Josh van der Fleer with his 50th cap. So that just shows the sort of, I think, the inclusive environment that Andy Farrell has created, and it also, I think, shows how high Gary Ringrose is rated in there.
Is there any sense? I mean, obviously his health is the main thing, but he seemed like he was on the pitch getting the medal.
I think I'm not obviously not a doctor, but I think the return to play concussion protocols are so much more now about trying to get you back on your feet and trying to get you active and stuff. So I don't necessarily think that means we're going to see Gary Ringrose play against Ulster next weekend. I'm not sure, but I'm sure like Leinster and Ireland, to be fair, have a good track record of giving players as much time. I think in terms of 12, I should mention, I think if Jonathan Daunty had played, throughout the Six Nations, he only played the last 2 games, and outside of Antoine Dupont, he is probably France's most important player. So, and he was a big miss in Dublin.
Yeah,
as well. He's exceptional.
Look, I think the thing about the if Ireland do play France in the World Cup, it's about the available. The world-class players that both sides have available. I know we have strength in depth, and we're going to talk about it now when we get to the front row, but you absolutely, whoever is most fortuitous with injuries heading into that game, are going to be favourites for me on the day before kick-off.
Yeah, like that's what I mean. Like, so much can happen. Like there's going to be injuries by the time we even get to the start of the World Cup. So what is it? It's going to be a 33-man World Cup squad, and right now we can all pick our World Cup squads, and I would say 30-31 of the players would be fairly similar across the board, but really and truly they're not all going to make it, and that's just an unfortunate reality, I think, of playing a collision sport. But you definitely feel, I'd say, more confident than you would have been, we'll say, even at this time last year, you know, heading into a situation like that, because I think lots of the players underneath the first tier have really pushed on to another level with Ireland, likes of Ryan Baird, Tom O'Toole, so it's encouraging.
Okay, let's get to the front row. Cyril Bay, Dan Sheehan and Finlay Bealham makes it.
I thought the props were actually the most difficult to pick. I know everyone will probably debate all of my selections, but for me the props were probably the two most difficult. So I'll start with Cyril Boyle. Why don't I have Andrew Porter? People are probably saying. I thought Andrew Porter was really, really good for Ireland. Definitely one of their stronger players. For me though, there's still, like, he like kind of toes a fine line between like being aggressive and over aggressive. He conceded 6 penalties against Wales. He conceded 4 penalties against England. So that's 10 penalties in 2 games for a prop. I still think certain referees feel that he kicks his hips out at scrum time, which is an issue as well. We talk about, you know, painting the right pictures, and I think certain referees are just happy to ping Porter for that. So while I thought he was very good, I just think Cyril Boy was exceptional as well. Like, he's very similar to Andrew Porter. He can do it all. I think he was someone who grew into the tournament as well. He probably looked a little bit leggy in terms of that front loading block that we spoke about, but he was really, really good. Dan Sheehan, I mean, you could have argued maybe Julian Marchand, I think is really only the other player you could have said, but you know, Dan Sheehan missed a game as well, but I thought he was really, really good. Finlay Bealham, I found it hard to pick a tight end, if I'm being honest. Obviously Furlong missed most of the Six Nations, and last weekend, by his own high standards, it was probably his poorest day for Ireland, which we just never say about Ireland. I've actually been amazed with how many people I've seen lots of the people's teams at the tournament, and they have Tadhg Furlong in. They obviously haven't been watching really if they're putting Tadhg Furlong in their team, because Tadhg Furlong is generally a 9 out of 10 every week, and that certainly wasn't a 9 out of 10 last week. So I just couldn't put Tadhg Furlong in for that. I think Xander Fagerson maybe could have been, you know, a shout there. Uni Antonio obviously, you know, got the suspension after he should have got the red card against Ireland. I didn't think he was particularly good in the Six Nations either. So I landed on Finlay Bealham because I think coming into the Six Nations, if you had said Tadhg Furlong won't play until Murrayfield, you would have been really, really worried, particularly with that France game in round 2. Even going to Wales in round 1, you know, the Welsh scrum has been pretty good this season, even in their regions, as poor as they have been. And no one was talking about Ireland missing Tadhg Furlong, and no. I think that is a real testament to how much Finlay Bealham has come on. You think that back to Hugo Keenan's try, the stunning set piece move that they scored, and Finlay Bealham was such a key part of that, and it looked like Tadhg Furlong there. So like, it was a seamless switch, and it was really disappointing obviously that he picked up that injury in Rome, but then you have Tadhg Furlong coming back. So people would probably come at me with picking Finlay Bealham, but I mean, I think Xander Fagerson is really probably the only one who has a shout there.
It's got to be a testament to Farrell as well, that like the players that aren't starting are so valued. Like when they come in, it seems seamless. Like throughout.
Yeah, and like he's encouraging them to be themselves, which kind of a lot of people thought was a bit of a cliche at the start. But you think of Mac Hansen, like, I mean, geez, he was coming out with golden quotes throughout the whole Six Nations, even on Saturday night again in the mix zone, just like thrill-a-minute stuff. James Lowe's the same, and Finlay Bealham, by his own sort of admission, is a bit of a quirky character, you know, and they're all being encouraged to just be themselves. And I think Finlay Bealham is one of the guys actually who Netflix are particularly focusing on. He's given him extra access, and I think a lot of people won't be aware of him. Like, he's a bit of a gamer. He just, you know, he likes kind of different kind of things, not to your kind of stereotypical rugby player. And maybe people will see a bit of that when we get the Netflix documentary next year. But I think he probably summed up, you know, the culture, Johnny, that you're talking about in terms of Farrell creating this positive environment. And like, when guys are feeling happy off the pitch, you know, they're going to play better on it, and that is so true. That applies to anything at all. So I thought Finlay Bealham was really, really good throughout the tournament that he played.
We saw him in a full-length leg brace at the weekend.
I think he's supposed to be back mid-April. So like, those knee braces can be a bit, you know, you see them and you go, whoa, geez.
You're in traction.
Yeah, like Jamie Osborne for Leinster, the young Leinster centre, was was in one as well last Saturday, so he's going to be out for a while. But I think Bealham is hoping to be back in mid-April. Connacht obviously have an important end of the season, and he's really important there in Connacht. So
yeah, that's a pity about Osborne, because you felt like if there was going to be any potential bolters, he was in that category. Okay, so it's a French and an Irish second row. No, I think, surprised anybody, James Ryan is there. You've gone for Flamand. Am I got that right?
Yeah, well, sounds good to me. Yeah, Thibaut Flamand. Yeah, Thibaut Flamand. He is exceptional. I think he sort of personifies the new age lock. He actually really reminds me of Ryan Baird in terms of his athletic profile, the way he plays the game. And you think that France came into the Six Nations without Cameron Wackey, who is, you know, one of the best young locks in the world. They didn't really miss him, so I thought Flamand was outstanding. James Ryan, I mean, I don't get too kind of caught up in kind of, you know, the players of the tournament, particularly not when it goes to a public vote, which I just think is an absolute nonsense. But I cannot understand how James Ryan hasn't been nominated for Player of the Year. I'm not saying necessarily Player of the Tournament. I'm not saying necessarily he had to win it, but in terms of picking six guys, I just think James Ryan was nailed on to be in there.
It seemed curiously biased against the forwards. It was 5 backs and one, and Keelan Doris is the only. Am I right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, off the top of my head. Yeah. I think that's it, because they're not that glamorous. And it was funny actually. Like, Thomas Ramos had a really good second half of the Six Nations. You know, you mentioned about him not putting him at fullback, but I was talking to a few French journalists after the France game in Ireland, and they were like really critical of Thomas Ramos. He got taken off early in that game. They felt like that it was a lot of the blame was down to him for Ireland winning, and all of a sudden now he's being, you know, nominated for Player of the Tournament. But I think you're right, Ger. Like, James Ryan's role is so unglamorous, but it's so bloody important to, I know you guys have spoken about it as well in the show in terms of, like, and I have as well with you, but how important quick ruck ball is. Ryan's role in that is so important in terms of hitting rucks and ensuring that Jameson Gibson Park has quick ball to play off. But they're the kind of things that, like, you know, it's not really sexy.
Not sexy, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So, but in terms of like Irish performance and locks, I thought he was outstanding.
Speaking of sexy, it's an entire Ireland back row that is pretty sexy. O'Mahony, Van der Fleer, Caelan Doris.
Yeah, again, I think Peter O'Mahony fits into the James Ryan category. He won't get a lot of the plaudits, particularly outside Ireland, but I thought he had a quietly outstanding tournament for Ireland, particularly in Murrayfield when everything was going to pot around the line out. Himself and James Ryan came together and sorted it out. Josh Van der Fleer, I mean, what more can you say about him? Thrown into the line out. Andy Farrell said he took up golf 3 years ago, down to single figures already. The guy's got it all. Caelan Doris, it was really unfortunate. I would be surprised if he had been fully fit in that England game last week. He wasn't at his kind of dominant best, but up to that point, before he got the injury early on in Murrayfield, I think he was nailed on to be probably Player of the Tournament, and I think now it's definitely more of a debate.
I know there was a debate about the rule and the validity of the rule and the law, and okay, so the law is the law, and so therefore the Scottish quick line out didn't even look that quick, I have to say. But anyway, the piece of athleticism from Doris to win the ball was like Michael Jordan-esque, because it's like, I'm kind of stretching over. It wasn't even straight. And now it's wiped from everything. We're never going to see it again in the highlights rounds.
And it cost Ireland, well, it didn't cost because they had a couple of chances at the end, but a bonus point, and they would have had a Grand Slam with 5 bonus points, which has never been done before. So maybe it was kind of just keep everyone's, you know, expectations. 24 out of 25 points. I know they got a couple of bonus points for winning the Grand Slam, but 24 out of 25 points and still feeling like there's plenty of scope for improvement is a remarkable place to be.
That's the bit, isn't it? That if they can just make sure that the complacency that we felt as a nation before kick-off.
Well, I spoke with that on Saturday as well. My cat, like, saying, like, we can actually, certainly my unit can play a lot better than we have. Is that, and that's not arrogance. It's like, we actually can.
No, I think if you went through each of the games, you'll pick out holes in it. Like, you're never going to have like a full, 100% perfect performance. That's not realistic. But I think if you went through it, and which Ireland will, they will find loads of holes. Like, you think back to the England performance, they probably saved their worst performance to last, really. Like, I know Rome was a bit different because they made a few changes, but to beat England at home with a bonus point to win a Grand Slam, and it was probably like a 7 out of 10 performance, you'd have to say. Like, it's just incredible, really. So I think that's enough to keep everyone's feet on the ground, really, and particularly the coaching staff. So while the players will have enjoyed the last few days, like when they come into camp in July, before the August kind of warm-up games, they'll be given reams of footage, I think, for areas to improve.
And you had, like, say, you had New Zealand, but then you have like Scotland, Italy, England, and obviously the French game, where they had to come through real mental and kind of physical, like, fortitude to need to show that. And it's like, I think definitely stands to a team's like, okay, we'll manage this. We've done this time and time again, different scenarios as well.
And the pressure last week was different to a pressure of going down to New Zealand and winning a third test because they were at home in front of a home crowd. And I think it was actually better that England came and gave them a game because they had to find a way to win.
The sending off was a shame in that regard. It was like, because then, like, if it were 15v15,
I think they still would have
won.
They still would have beaten them, yeah. And Paul O'Connell made this point after the French game, recently talking about the French game, that he was delighted that Antonio didn't get sent off because I think that game certainly there would have been a caveat, of France, but they were down to 40 men. I don't think this England team with 15 men would have beaten Ireland. So pretty good place to be.
All right, Cian, good stuff. I expect it'll be a busy day defending your selections.
Looking forward to my mentions. I
was going to say, Cian Tracey has picked his team in the tournament there, and we're very grateful of the Irish Independent, of course.